Hello everyone, this is Blaine with Jig Up Lurecraft, and I got something a little bit different in the vise today. If you've been following any of my recent videos, then you've seen I've been making a lot of bass stuff. Some jigs, some spinner baits, fun stuff like that. But here we have something that is much smaller. This is a little bitty silicone jig meant for panfish and trout, and I call it the Sili Bugger. Partly because I make it with silicone and partly because I think it looks really, really buggy. So we're going to jump into how you can make this very simple little jig, and I have a little funny story to share about it as well, pertaining to why I really like to fish these now. So let's get started. So this Sili Bugger jig is a simple ball head jig. For this build, I'm using my Weedless ball head, and I am using a 1/32 ounce slot and a number 6 Mustad skipjack hook. So we pour a little lead here and we trim up our head there, and before you know it, we've got a pretty nice looking little jig head. Now what I'm really excited about with this particular color I'm doing today is the paint that I'm using. So again, I'm using Nova Stone Chameleon powder paint from Barlow's Tackle. This is Sunburst, which is a Colorshift gold powder paint. This stuff is gorgeous. I absolutely love what this color does to jigs and spinner baits too. It's a very fine powder, so it coats very evenly and very, very thoroughly. If you haven't checked out this Nova Stone Chameleon paint, do it. You will not regret it. I love this stuff. Beautiful colors, and it's just easy to work with. Alright, so our jig is painted, and now you can see the powder paint and this Mustad hook in all of their glory. This is a very pretty jig, even without anything tied onto it. But rest assured, we're going to tie on a little bit of silicone to really spruce up this jig. It's going to make it look buggy. It's going to make it look like something that a bluegill or a crappie, even a bass, will want to eat. So I'm starting here with some 140 Denier flat wax nylon. And the first material that I'm going to use is a simple gold silicone. I'm just going to use one strand, and I'm going to double it over so that it is essentially 2 strands on the jig. Now again, this pattern is going to look very, very buggy. I'm anticipating that it'll kind of look like a cricket or perhaps some kind of nymph larva with those silicone strands kind of flailing about. But what I really like is having this little pop of gold on here. It gives the jig a kind of a hot spot, something that the fish can really target. So with that gold, I am putting some black here, and this is going to be the main silicone color that you'll see. It's going to be black to kind of give it a natural muted look with some pops of gold. Now, if I were going to put a trailer on this little jig, I would probably use either a small crappie grub, like a 2-inch Kalin's grub or something like that, or I would consider using like a trout magnet. Like, can you imagine a black and gold trout magnet on this little Sili Bugger jig? I mean, talk about appetizing. I would eat that, let alone a little bluegill or a trout. So let's see if I can find a trout magnet laying around and put it on this jig so you can see how it looks. So now at this point, I've got my silicone on, and I'm just going to cinch it in really good. And whip finishing with all of these silicone strands hanging out is very challenging. Ask me how I know. I tried it. It didn't turn out too well. Maybe some of you more skilled tiers would be able to do it no problem, but I had some difficulty. So instead, I'm going to use this same little trick that I use for lots of other jigs that I tie. I'm going to take some contrasting colored thread and make a little loop and bring it up here into my collar. And once it's up there, I'll just tie the loop in. Careful of those silicone strands. They still get in the way. Even though I'm not whip finishing, those strands still get in the way. So once I've tied this loop in, then I'm just going to cut off a tag end and thread it through the loop. And then I'll pull it back through the collar. Pretty basic stuff. All right, so now all that's left is to trim off the tag end of this thread, and then I'm going to put on some water-based head cement and trim these silicone strands, and then this Sili Bugger Jig will be done. Now, as I said before, I have a fun story about this little pattern. I first tied this with kind of a pink and white color pattern, and I didn't actually know if this Sili Bugger Jig would work. So I was out fishing on the river with my brother, fishing for smallmouths, rock bass, anything that would bite. And just for fun, I tied on this little pink and white Sili Bugger that I tied up, and very first cast, a rock bass hammered it. So obviously that doesn't happen every day for me. It's very rare that I take out a lure for the first time, a new design, and very first cast have a fish hammer it like that time. Usually, you know, it at least takes one or two casts before any fish will hit a new design. But so that was pretty great. I was really excited to see that, and it's inspired me to make more of these. So yeah, here's our finished gold bug Sili Bugger Jig. 1/32 ounce Mustad size 6 skipjack hook. I anticipate I'll be catching lots of panfish with this little guy. Thank you for tagging along as I built this little jig. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, or even subscribe to my email newsletter at jigasuplurecraft.com. On that blog, I release lots of lure recipes and how-to articles detailing how you can make stuff like this yourself. So if that's something that you're into, check it out, jigasuplurecraft.com.